The worlds of professional audio and streaming audio are finally converging, and I could not be more excited. I can't believe I'm saying this, but PreSonus have done it. They have created a awesome little USB dynamic microphone that I think finally delivers what I think USB microphone buyers expect out of a dynamic microphone. And I am very impressed, not only in the sound possibilities at play here, but the complete package value that you're getting. This thing is $200. It comes with 2 different submixes plus your headphone mix. It has a full onboard DSP to do a whole bunch of post-processing capabilities. It's a dynamic microphone. It works up close and far away without losing its signal fidelity for the most part. This is awesome. I'm EposVox, the stream professor, and I have reviewed countless microphones on the channel, and there has been a move over the past few years to get more and more companies on board with the idea of making a USB dynamic microphone, because dynamic microphones are desirable by a lot of streamers due to their natural kind of background noise rejecting capabilities, which for independent streaming, when you're at a desk, you've got reflections off your monitors, you've got keyboard and mouse sounds, you've got all sorts of, my PC fans are actually super loud at the moment. You've got all sorts of extra stuff. A condenser mic will give you a more natural sound, but it will pick all of that up, and it becomes a lot more difficult to properly filter out without extra tools. PreSonus has been rocking the home and studio audio production kind of space for a long time now with their Studio Live mixers going back forever. I had a Firewire Studio Live mixer for a few years back on the channel, and I've been having some serious conversations with them, and they want to deliver products for independent streamers as well, to kind of blend the markets of professional audio and streaming audio. And they're doing that with 2 products. They have released this microphone we're checking out today, the Revelator Dynamic, and they also have the Revelator IO44, which is a super tiny little audio interface. There's a lot going on with this. It'll be its own separate video. The Revelator Dynamic microphone is, of course, a dynamic microphone, which does not require, it's USB, but, wouldn't require phantom power to activate the capsule. It's a voice coil that's activated by your mic itself. It has a frequency response of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. It runs in 44.1, 48, 88.2, and 96 kilohertz modes at 24-bit and connects over USB Type-C along with a headphone jack on the bottom. You also have physical controls to swap presets, we'll talk about in a moment, to switch your monitoring modes, as well as to mute the microphone and adjust your headphone volume if you'd like. This is the sequel to their previous Revelator USB microphone, which I loved the value package of, but it was yet another USB condenser microphone. We have plenty of those these days, and the sound was okay, but for streaming purposes, I'm not sure I was sold on. It was all right, but the value offering there competed with the Elgato Wave in a way that we didn't have a whole lot of other products doing. This is their attempt at a broadcast streaming dynamic microphone, and the complete package at play here is phenomenal. So you get the microphone itself. Physically, comes with a windscreen. And this is the most, of all of the alleged, everyone keeps telling me certain microphones are competing with the SM7B. Of all of the alleged SM7B competitors, this one the most resembles it. It has the same interference tube design and everything, even though once you have the buttons on it and the badge and everything, you might not think that it's actually a competitor to it. By the way, this is a cardioid microphone, so it will have some off-axis coloration, but not as much as a hypercardioid or supercardioid. So you get the microphone itself. It sounds great. It is very thick. So I am testing all of the microphones today that you are going to see. I'm comparing it against a bunch of $100 to $200 USB microphones. I'm testing them all at my normal, at a fairly normal broadcast talking distance, which is about 2 to 3 inches away. And then I'm testing it at 2/5 away to show the impact of proximity effect. Because when you get right up on this microphone, it gets thick and juicy in a good way, if that's the sound that you want. Not everybody wants that, and a lot of people want the flexibility to move around. And what I love about this microphone is while I can get right up on it and get that thick, juicy, I am very congested today. In a world where one microphone needs to beat them all, the PreSonus Revelator Dynamic attempts to do just that. I am so sick this month. Anyway. I love that I have the flexibility to get right up on it, but I can also sit here and push it a couple fists away, and other than adjusting gain to compensate, so we were at minus 30, or at 30, now we're at about 40 decibels of gain. Other than adjusting gain and the natural impact of proximity effect being that as I remove myself from the microphone, that lower end kind of emphasis reduces a bit, The sound is still very natural and usable. And in fact, I cranked the gain up a little too much there, so we were riding the limiter. I apologize for that. We're at about 35 now. I'm trying to keep it consistent. You have that flexibility to back up on it, keep it, comfortable positioned, or start kissing it if you want to. Now, I've talked about in previous reviews that this is becoming less of a desirable thing, both from streamers and from viewers who are tired of having their ears blown out by super thick, juicy sounds. So I tend to keep mine 3 to 4 inches away, 2 to 3, 3 to 4 inches away, depending on what I'm doing. But this is still a Revelator product. So like their IO24 audio interface I reviewed previously, as well as their USB condenser microphone that they covered, they have a whole software suite for it, and this thing is amazing. So obviously, there's the Universal Control app that allows you to control all of your PreSonus stuff. So I have the IO24 connected here. It lets me control both of them at the same time. Also, they do have a new iPad app, which lets you control all of the Universal Control stuff, which is pretty cool. We'll dive into that maybe with the interface. But here we have the actual, mic chain set up here. So I have everything enabled. You have the ability, if I exit out of here, this is what the software looks at. Now, I will say, as I mentioned before, I have been having conversations with PreSonus about supporting streamers and content creators, and I was not happy with the Revelator software when I originally reviewed the IO24. I thought it was a little convoluted, a little kind of silly, and the submixes didn't make a whole lot of sense in a streaming environment. They have revamped a lot of this, making the dials a little bit easier to work with, adding some extra settings, and the submixes are now literally labeled Stream Mix A and B, and you can toggle your headphones between all three. It's pretty nice. So here you have your main microphone channel, you have your playback if you're playing over USB, and then you have your virtual submixes, as well as reverb. Although, admittedly, I'm struggling to find a way to activate it, and maybe I'm just being dumb, but like if I crank this up, I don't really know that I'm getting anything. If I turn off solo, I still don't think we're getting any reverb. If I turn solo on this, I don't know exactly what I'm doing wrong, but at least last time I checked, I was not getting reverb. Okay, the reverb only sends to the individual output streams, not the device I was hooking in Adobe Audition. So it works fine. Hey, you. Yeah, you. We're going dark and dramatic for this one. Do you want help choosing the right microphone for you? Do you want hands-on EQ advice, or for an EQ profile to just be generated for you? Do you want a community of like-minded creators to help build each other up and give advice on not only the tech and the gear, but the actual tools and the practices and techniques that you use for streaming and content creation? Join my Discord server, discord.gg/EposVox. That's what we do there, and I have paid premium tiers where if you join, you can get free consultations, EQ sessions, and all that. Link will be in the description, or, again, discord.gg/EposVox. Help support independent education and journalism. So here up at the top, you have their FAT channel. And again, they use this as, their onboard DSP on all of their Revelator products, as far as I can tell, which gives you a wide variety of options. This allows you to quickly get a high quality sound should you want, without having to know a lot about audio, or you can start toggling settings from here, or you can go all the way in with this icon in the top right and manually tune everything yourself. So I have set up a couple presets. It comes with a few presets here. It comes with Broadcast Basic, Light, Radio, and Clear. These are a little boomy for my taste, but they do have a high-pass filter toggled, and so I think it kind of rolls it off in a decent way. I would still tweak it from there. It makes some of the kind of cliche... I'll say Basic gets a little too boomy. Radio, perhaps, is my favorite one overall. So here we're just talking as normal with the default, just no signal chain, no processing applied. My computer fans are extra loud today due to having to clear my CMOS and didn't set fan curves and whatever, but that'll be consistent across all the audio tests you hear today. And this is how the PreSonus sounds, but we're going to go through the FAT channel here and test out some of the presets. This is a goofy one. This is Computron 4000. This is Broadcast Clear. This is the Broadcast Clear preset. I do feel like the limiter is a little aggressive on some of these presets, and the EQ curve bump in the low end is more aggressive than I would like, as I said in other presets. We're now transitioning to the Broadcast Radio preset here. However, they do have a high-pass filter, low-cut filter applied by default, which is kind of what I asked for. So pretty nice there. Most of these presets have the noise gate set to moderate, which might cut me out a little bit. I now changed it to low. So we went from Broadcast Clear to Broadcast Radio. Now we're on Broadcast Light. Test, 1, 2, 3. And then we have Broadcast Basic, which is what we're on now. This is Broadcast Basic. And now we have the Witness Protection preset. I will tell you my identity. You can never know it. And we're here on the Computron 4000. Why did you do that, Dave? The problem that I'm running into that makes it a little boomy, though, is actually it's mostly the limiter. And this has to do with how Windows handles WDM audio devices rather than ACO. But you ride the limiter a little too much with these presets, whereas I think a little toning down also works, as well as the noise gates get super aggressive for me by default. So I've tweaked them a bit. But going off of this, I've actually built my own presets. I built one with the standard parametric EQ and then one with the vintage EQ. So if I dive in here, we have the high pass filter, of course, which I have set to about 59, 60 hertz to roll off the extra boomy information of my voice that isn't really usable. Then there's a noise gate, which both has the noise gate and an expander, which these buttons aren't the most logical, but it's got an expander as well as a noise gate threshold here with attack and release times. I had to really fine tune this to not make it chop up my voice, but I think I'm happy with where it is. You have compressor, EQ, and limiter, and you can change the order of EQ and compressor. I used to always EQ before I compressed, but compressing your audio really changes the frequencies. And so I kept finding that whatever I'd set up in my EQ isn't really how it sounds after you compress it, because it just changes the dynamics of your audio. So these days I compress before I EQ personally. I have this set very modestly. The default presets are kind of aggressive, but I have 2-to-1 ratio, a fairly gentle threshold, -17, not too bad, not going to really clamp down your audio too much. And then attack and release is set kind of to be enough to catch it, but not enough to make the different syllables and pauses interrupt each other. EQ, again, you have 3 different EQs available: standard, passage, and vintage. Standard, passive, and vintage. I prefer the standard parametric EQ. It's what I can learn the best from. For whatever reason, it likes to screw up where my mouse is with these, but I do my standard EQ curve. I do all the time here, just fine-tuned for this specific mic. So I've got the slightest of boosts to the 100 to 150 hertz range to get that warmth out of my voice. The high-pass filter's cutting off the stuff I don't need, though. I've got a low-mid cut here around 250 hertz. It starts at 205, but, it starts landing 250 hertz to cut out the muddiness caused by boosting up the low end. Got a mids cuts to cut out the nasaliness, because I'm literally always congested, so I have a lot of nasally frequencies coming out. And then a little bit of just a treble boost to get that clarity back out there. And then the limiter, I just have set basically super, super high so that it's just preventing me from clipping and distorting. You can set that however you want. You'll just have to gain it back up after. But you want to balance the makeup gain here in your compressor with the limiter, because if you crank that up, then you're riding the limiter, and then that kind of distorts you a little bit. And then, of course, there are voices. You've got a doubler, detuner, vocoder, ring modulator, filters, and delay. And we can play with that. This is the doubler. This is the detuner. This is the vocoder. This is the ring modulator. Here are some filters. And here's the delay. These presets are obviously meant to be tinkered with and do some voices. The effects are okay. I'm not a huge fan of how the vocoder sounds, no matter how I tinker with it. I am very interested recently. What's it called? The Roland SVT4? Is that what it is? VT4. The Roland VT4. I've seen a few streamers now bring this up. It's $250 for just a voice transformer, which is not worth it whatsoever. But as a toy to play with a lot of cool preset capabilities and tune following and things like that, it has a pretty cool vocoder effect in it. So at some point I might spring on it just to play with it for stream effects or whatever, but that's not the point. So you have all of this doing the processing on the microphone itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn all this off. Actually, I wanted to compare. So this is with the parametric EQ, but I've set up basically the same preset here with the vintage EQ, which is what you're hearing now. So you can see what this vintage EQ looks like, trying to emulate some rack mount gear. I'm not a huge fan of the passive EQ at all. I don't understand it. I could do some learning for it, but it's not something I have a whole lot of experience with, but I like the vintage EQ. Of course, now I've messed up my preset here, so we'll just go back to this one. But we're going to turn the fat channel off now. Now, for my microphone comparisons, all of them are going to be the raw audio anyway, but now you're hearing the raw audio of the microphone. I didn't do a whole lot of aggressive EQing here, and honestly, it is still a very thick microphone if you get right up on it, which is something I like. I think it's important to consider what microphone is good for your voice, in that the frequencies that it kind of emphasizes and the kinds of sounds you're going for really matter here. So like, for example, comparing the differences between the Revelator, USB condenser microphone and the Revelator Dynamic. This is thick and juicy and rejects background sounds and is more for podcasting, spoken word, or rapping or something. Whereas the Revelator USB condenser is going to be, thinner and brighter, but it's going to be a little bit more natural. It's going to have the full range of your voice without emphasizing that low end, and that's a little bit better for guitar and singing and things like that. So you got to choose the right mic for you, but despite being a USB microphone, it doesn't have any of that USB crunch or compressed sound or anything like that. It still sounds really natural, and I am impressed. And again, as I mentioned, you can control all these presets from the buttons on the mic itself. The mic comes with a little yoke for you to attach it to a mic arm, and it makes it super easy to attach, but it also has a 1/4-20 threaded tap on the back of it as well, in case you're trying to attach it with some other third-party mount, which I appreciate. Now, I wanted to briefly touch on the Revelator software here. Again, we'll cover it more in depth when I talk about the IO44 audio interface, just as an update. But to use the stream mixes and things like that, effectively, you have your headphone mix, where you can adjust levels, you can adjust ear levels, all of this however you like, and you have a playback device, so whatever is playing back to your headphone device here. So I know I have a whole lot of audio devices, but if I scroll down to Playback LR, Revelator Dynamic, whatever I have playing here, I can adjust the levels up to my headphones, and then there's Virtual A and Virtual B as well. Now you can see these show up both for my IO24 and the Revelator Dynamic in my audio devices. I have Virtual Output B, and Virtual Output A is hanging around here somewhere. There's no organization to these devices. Yeah, so I have 2 different virtual devices I can route audio to, as well as the general playback. So I can adjust these, and then I can come over here to the stream mix and control how I want them to be sounding, including my microphone. Come down to stream mix B, same thing here, and you can toggle listening to any of the mixes. This is really important because it gives you not only 2 different virtual audio devices to mix to, plus I guess the default headphone device, but you also have technically 3 submixes, or I guess 1 mix and 2 submixes, in that you can change what you hear in your headphones, you can change what, say, your stream hears, and then you can change what your recording hears separately from what you hear. Or you could change what your stream hears versus what your voice chat hears if you want to route stream X B to voice chat. You have like a sampler or a looper or something. You have a lot of flexibility at play here, which the potential was there for the Revelator software back when I originally reviewed the IO24, but they hadn't quite lived up to it yet or made it as easy to understand. That's present here. Especially for music production, this is super useful because in your headphones, you can keep your mic volume super loud so you can stay in key or whatever. I don't know anything about that. I'm still learning. You don't want to know. But then you can have your music level a bit more balanced and turned up for your streams to hear or whatever. All right, let's cut to some microphone comparisons versus some similarly priced USB microphones and talk about how they sound and differ. This is a microphone test. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on its dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 3 rings for the Oven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. Talking while typing on box royal switches. Talking while clicking. talking while typing on box royal switches, talking while typing, and clicking. Talking while typing on box royal switches, talking while typing, talking while clicking. Talking while typing on box royal switches, talking while clicking. We're talking while typing, boopity boop boop boop. Talking while typing, bop 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 bop. Talking while typing on box royal switches, talking while clicking. Talking while typing, box royal switches, and clicking. We're talking while typing on box royal switches. We're talking while clicking. This is the same microphone test, but we're now 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. And now the microphone is 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. So now we've moved the mic 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. And now we have the microphone 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Alright, now this is with a distance of 2 fists instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Alright, I've now moved the I've now moved the microphone 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Now the microphone is 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Now I have the microphone about 2 fists away instead of 1. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. I'm going to say I'm very impressed with this microphone. It is $200, and $200, obviously that's the out-of-the-gate price versus a lot of sales and used prices of these other microphones that have been out for anywhere from 2 years to 10 years, but this is twice the price of the Elgato Wave and a little more than twice the price of what you get the Samson Q2U for. It is hard to make an argument for any microphone that comes out these days that isn't just like absolute god tier to pay twice or more of the price than competing offers. Now, Samson Q2U competes quite favorably. It's a little bright, and you still hear a little bit of the USB compression over USB, which is how I tested this, but it is incredibly favorable, and you start with it over USB, and then eventually you upgrade to a pretty nice USB mixer or audio interface or something like that, and this will still do you pretty well. So sound-wise, it is hard to compete with this price-wise just because it's such an incredible value. In terms of capabilities, you got the Elgato Wave sitting pretty at $99 most of the time. You can get it for $80 sometimes on sale or on refurbished deals. And this has a competent software package. You don't get any post-processing built into this. They have now enabled VSTs in the Elgato Wavelink software, so you can add your own plugins with like the Reaper plugins. Or something like that to add post-processing, but it is a condenser mic, and it does struggle when it comes to background noise and ambient noise and things like that compared to a dynamic mic like this one. It still gives you a great sound, and I would argue that, obviously, if you're going for the broadcast sound, getting right up on this dynamic microphone and getting the thick, juicy sound my voice is going out, is going to sound the best overall, but the sound that you get when you back up this microphone to a couple fists away is actually quite comparable to the sound that you get naturally, just kind of up close out of the Elgato Wave, which is very cool. Versus a couple of the other mics The MV7, it's really hard to get a good sound out of. I think over USB, I'm getting a really clean sound at the moment, but you have to do a lot of EQ to kind of put some of the sound you want back into it. I wouldn't say it's flat. It's just a little thin, I guess. It's always felt like a little bit of a cheaper microphone, which was kind of disappointing given it came from Shure, who made, the SM7B everyone's lusting after. The Q9U from Samsung, which is supposed to be like the upgraded Q2U, is still just so dark. I'm still, a year later, I'm trying to figure out what went wrong with this microphone. I keep watching other reviews to make sure I didn't get a broken sample. It is a very dark microphone. It doesn't sound good. And it also launched at like $200. The Icon USB is actually a little bit darker over USB than the XLR version, so it doesn't compete as favorably here, but it is going to be a lot more cooperative in terms of off-axis angles and, keeping it a little bit further away from you, and you can usually EQ that to be a little bit brighter to make it sound more like the Icon XLR. And then, of course, we've got the BEACN mic. I said I wasn't going to talk about it again, so I'm more going to just kind of pose this in a three-way here. You have 3 microphones now that really pose a compelling streaming option with virtual audio cable software. You've got the Elgato Wave, which came out first, and is now the cheapest. $99, again, is the most you should pay for this. And the Wave 3 and the Wave 1 sound the same. It's just the physical controls that differ. You don't have as many dial options, and you don't have the capacitive mute button on the Wave 1. Then you have the BEACN mic, which came out second, $270, or nearly 3 times the cost of this one. Sounds crap out of box. I have said enough on that. Has an amazing post-processing suite with the onboard DSP, and has some virtual audio cables. The virtual audio cables are comparative, both in terms of functionality and quantity and whatever else, to the Elgato Wave, and if you want to control them effectively, you kind of need an external controller, although the Elgato Wave does let you change some of it if you have the Wave 3 on board. The Elgato Wave does not have post-processing, but it supports VSTs, which are just software plugins that you can use. Now we have a third microphone, which just came out the day I'm recording. I'm a bit behind on my reviews because there was a million embargoes releasing in February and multiple released on the same day for this one. This came out at $200, so twice as much as the Wave, but $70 or so cheaper than the BEACN mic. It sounds stellar out of box. It's flexible both up close and further away, whereas while I still don't like the sound of the BEACN mic up close, it completely falls apart at a distance. It has an onboard DSP, just like the BEACN mic, for lots of post-processing options. They have a ton of presets on board. PreSonus knows what they're doing with audio. And you have like some solid physical control options, and it has virtual audio cables. Now you get 3 submixes, which is more than either of these offer. You get 2 virtual audio devices instead of the like 4 or 5 or 6 or so that these offer. I don't think that's really necessary, but you can still control it with something like the BEACN Mix, which is pretty cool. I think, obviously I've said my piece on the BEACN mic. I think it's a very compelling offering based on your goals of using it. If you want the most natural sounding sound, you're trying to do singing, or you have a great sound treated environment, the Elgato Wave is still more compelling. You just have to learn to use VST plugins. That's only on Windows, by the way. If you want the broadcast sound, if you want to do more kind of rapping, or you need that noise rejection, you're getting arguably a more competent software solution, other than slightly more limiting in virtual devices, from the PreSonus option. It's very tough to call, especially since it's $100 difference. You could theoretically spend that $100 on some decent sound treatment, acoustic treatment for your space. Will it be enough to make the difference? I can't tell you that. But here's the samples. Here's what you can decide. I got into editing this video and realized I didn't actually talk about a comparison I wanted to make, which was supposed to kind of undo an entire review that I had on my plate that I no longer need to do. It's been on my list to review the PreSonus PD70, PreSonus's other dynamic microphone that they've had out for a year or two now, that they sent me late last year to review, and I was literally testing it for review whenever this microphone showed up. Well, it turns out they're effectively the same microphone, the same capsule, they're the same microphone design, the same capsule is in both, the same tuning is in both. So I don't really need to review it because they're effectively the same microphone, but there is a slight difference. So if you look at the frequency response graph for this microphone, you'll see it has a fairly stark presence boost, which helps, cut across things, which on its own, I don't take offense with, but the fact that it remains completely flat and neutral through the mids to the low end makes up for that, because that means that in my EQ, let me pull it up here and look at it myself. I've already shown it on screen, of course. I can mostly keep my high-end EQing fairly smooth, cut my mids, and just tweak the low end that I need to. It means it's a lot easier to work with than if you had also scooped the low end with the high end boost. But I do find the USB dynamic to be a little bit warmer compared to the XLR. I wasn't looking for differences, but whenever I was playing the samples side by side, and even when I first recorded this one, knowing how this one was sounding like in my testing, I was really confused because this one felt a little cold. It doesn't make any sense, but like, you know, it didn't have as much warmth to it as I expected. It sounds fine. You can EQ it to make it sound a little bit better. That's totally fine. But, you know, out of box, it was a little cold and tame. And so the fact that these are the same microphone is kind of interesting because I'm using, all of my testing with this was done with the PreSonus. Actually, that's not true. My original testing where I got my original like impression was done with the Audient Evo 4, but then all of the samples you hear in this video were with the PreSonus Revelator IO24. And theoretically, while obviously not the same components, the same design philosophies should be in both the Revelator microphone and the Revelator audio interface. But yet, I'm getting a ever so slightly different sound out of the USB microphone versus the XLR. I don't think it's a deal breaker in either direction. You can compensate whether you want it to be less warm or more warm. You can compensate for that in post. That's fine. I just wanted to convey that in a way, this is also a review of the PD70 XLR. It's just a little bit longer in USB instead of XLR. I think it's pretty compelling. But again, like I said, a new mic showing up over, I'd say $150 becomes tough to recommend in general, just due to how cheap everything else has gotten. And that's not necessarily PreSonus's fault so much as older products get cheaper and you can buy used. I always recommend buying used when possible, and that's obviously going to benefit an older product more. But there you go. This is a great microphone. I was blown away. I was kind of nervous when they were putting out a USB dynamic microphone. I was like, all right, we'll see. And I plugged this thing in, and from day one, I was stoked. I will probably do something with this mic to provide more samples when I'm not sick. I get sick fairly regularly. I have terrible allergies and some other stuff. I'm working on it with doctors. I'll figure it out. But I'm super congested today. But I re-recorded all of my samples today with this headspace so that you can hear the differences rather than cue it to where like some of them I'm congested and some of them I'm not. Hope you found this video helpful. Try to be as helpful as possible with my mic reviews. Let me know what you think and stay tuned. I believe next week get subscribed for the IO44 review. If you're looking for something else to watch, go check out my review on said Elgato Wave microphone if you're interested in what that's all about, or check out my video on the PreSonus Revelator IO24 audio interface. It's my Go XLR killer. I swapped my Go XLR for it, and it can kind of get you ready for what to expect for the IO44. Remember, be kind, rewind. Remember, be kind, rewind. Remember, be kind, rewind. My voice, I'm so congested, y'all. Ugh.